Hello and welcome to the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast. This is the show where we talk about all things transportation, anything that gets you from here to there. I'm the traffic anchor and the transportation reporter for Denver 7 News, Jason Luber, and if you would like to be on the show, you could always give a call here to the listener hotline 303-832-0217, and all my contact information is in the description of this program. For the longest time, I've wanted to talk to a train engineer to learn about what it's like to be riding the rails, and now I finally have the opportunity. You see, it was National Rail Safety Week a few weeks ago, and I was offered up some experts to talk about the dangers of collisions with a train, and not just cars and trucks, as we've seen from countless videos, but also with people involved with a train collision. Yeah, people walking on or around the tracks are hit and killed every year. Even worse, a research report titled Railroads, an Often Overlooked Danger to Children, released by Safe Kids Worldwide, finds that a child is killed in a train collision every 5 days. That was stunning news to me. With that, I wanted to talk not only about rail safety, but also what it's like to be a train engineer. And I'm fortunate enough to be able to do both with Buck Russel. Buck is Union Pacific Railroad's manager of public safety, but also longtime Class 1 locomotive engineer. Buck, thanks so much for being here on the world-famous Driving You Crazy podcast.
Good morning, and thank you.
So, Buck, we'll talk about the public safety stuff in just a minute. I really wanted to explore not only your experiences as a train engineer, but how you became interested in working for the railroads. As I understand it, you were a police officer first, investigating a train collision, and that's how you got involved in the railroads.
That is correct. I was a police officer in a small town just south of San Antonio, and unfortunately, the train had struck a vehicle, and I responded to investigate it. During the investigation, I got talking to the train crew about pay and benefits, and 26 years later, here I am.
You go through the process to be an engineer, and then there you are, right? So you decide you're going to be an engineer, and you're going through that process, through that training, and then you get behind the controls of your own locomotive. What was that feeling like? Did you feel like you were 10 years old with a smile from ear to ear when you were in that cabin?
You really do. I mean, you start out as a brakeman, a helper, and you learn how things are and what's what and how to do it safely, because that is always number one, because that equipment is cold, hard steel, and it's very unforgiving. So safety is always number one, not only Union Pacific, but all railroads. And then you promote to a conductor, who's actually, the conductor is the boss of the train, they're administrator of the train. They kind of decide the work that's going to be done and how it's going to be done. And then I was fortunate enough to promote to engineer. So you're physically in control of the train. You're like the pilot of an airline. To have all of that horsepower, the average locomotive weighs about 500,000 pounds, and they're in the area of 3,000 to 4,000 horsepower per locomotive, train 2 miles long. And it's amazing that you can make that go up to 70 miles an hour in freight service safely and abide by all the operating rules and traffic laws, I guess you would put it, on the railroad.
So take me into the cabin of the locomotive. I mean, it has to be so much larger up close than it is from a distance that most of us see a train. I mean, being there, climbing up into the cabin, it just has to be really an amazing sight. Take us into the cabin of the locomotive.
It's like entering the beast, I guess you could put it. You know, it's about 20 feet tall, 70 plus feet long, about 4,000, 5,000 horsepower, and you can feel the pistons moving up and down inside the engine. You know, and the engine, the diesel engine powers an electric generator, which we put power to the traction motors. So the horsepower is about, 4,000 horsepower. But when we physically run the train, we're pulling electricity, we're pulling amperage. So you run amperage, and it's just a monster of a machine, and everything behind you. It's just, you can feel it. You run a train by the seat of your pants. You feel it in your whole body. You set up straight with your back against the chair and your feet down on the ground, and you can actually feel the train pulling you pushing you, and you make the decisions. Do you need some air brakes? Do you need to just kind of come off the throttle a little bit, or other braking systems? It's just amazing the technology that we have. But you have the most modern state-of-the-art technology, multi-million-dollar locomotive. And one of the things that always fascinates me and that I teach is that when you're going up a hill and say it's a wet, we spray sand in front of the steel wheels on the steel rail, turn the rail into sandpaper, and it keeps the wheels from slipping and tearing the train apart. So modern 21st century locomotives, cowboy and Indian technology actually help us keep it going.
It's funny when I'm going to work. I get to work at 3:30 in the morning, and inevitably I'm hearing the blaring of a horn of one of the big trains, freight trains that's rolling through downtown Denver, right? And I'm thinking, how could we ever have flying cars and be the Jetsons if we still have 1800s technology rolling through our cities?
And people, they have, some folks have concerns with the horn. The horn is a safety device, and we are mandated by federal regulations to sound that horn at all public roadways. We start sounding the horn a quarter mile. That's 15 to 20 seconds before the train enters the crossing. And so people are, well, that engineer, they just lay on the horn. It's kind of correct, because if there's multiple crossings back to back to back, when we hit the surface of the crossing, we lay on the horn until the crossing is completely occupied, and then we do that for all the crossings that are back to back to back. So we do sound the horn. It is a warning device per federal regulations.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more about that as well as some of the safety zone areas that are now more silent, where you don't hear the train horns in some cities. We'll talk about that coming up in just a bit. My guest is Buck Russel. He's the Union Pacific Railroad's Manager of Public Safety. We're talking about railroading, and we'll also be talking about safety around the trains. What does the cabin look like from your vantage point? What are you seeing when you're sitting there in the engineer's seat? What do you see? How does it run? How does it work?
The cabins now, a lot of them are called whisper cabs. You actually don't hear the horn inside the cab on the modern locomotives, to save the hearing of the employees and everything else. There's a lot of things around that. You actually have in the computer screens or lights that tell you that the horn is actually sounding, but you're set inside a room. Basically, you're set inside the office, and there's a system of controls on a control stand, and then they're to the left and to the right in front, or straight ahead in front of you. The problem is you can't see. You start losing what you see as the locomotive approaches, because you're setting so high. You have the nose of the locomotive, and then you lose sight exactly what's in front of you. So the engineer on most locomotives sits on the right side of the cab, and the conductor, he or she sits on the left side of the cab. And occasionally we have a trainee who would sit in the middle seat. And they're like an airplane. They have refrigerators. We have relief facilities. I guess you could put it. But no, they actually ride really nice, and the chairs have cushions in them, and you kind of bounce up and down as you hit some spots on the tracks and stuff like that. The engineers who design these things have done great work with them.
Did you run more long distance rides or short runs?
My longest distance out of San Antonio, I live in San Antonio. I ran trains west to Del Rio and Eagle Pass, south to Laredo, Texas, north kind of to a city called Hearn that is near Bryan College Station, where Texas A&M University is at, and then Houston. Houston was our longest run out of San Antonio, 216 miles. And per federal law, the train crew can perform service for 12 hours. And then we have a van system that comes and takes us off the train, or gets a new crew, or we make it to the yard, the yarding tracks, and we put the train in the yard, and then a yard crew takes it over and divides up the train, and takes it to serve our customers.
And when you're out on one of these longer runs, are you there like when we're driving along the highway, where we have to just basically stare at the roadway, or can you just look around and enjoy the scenery and see the sights as you pass them?
You run it every day. It's kind of like autopilot. It's like when you go home, you're just like, what am I doing home? You know where the traffic lights are, you know the speed limits, and it's the same thing with us. You know where the hills are, the up, down, the bridges are, you know, all the traffic control systems that are on the tracks and all the speed limits and curbs associated with it. And so you're not really on autopilot, but you're very, very familiar with the territory that you're on. Plus, you have the conductor who is reminding you, hey, don't forget, in 2 miles, we have a speed restriction. In a mile, we have a speed restriction. All right, we're good. Hey, we're clear of the restriction. Let's pick back up our speed. So we work as a team in the cab to safely deliver what we need to our customers.
And you as a team are really together for several days in a row, right? It's not like you're showing up 9 to 5 and then you go home and you come back the next day.
Now, every day on the road where I predominantly was, the road, every day is somebody different. So an average trip to get somewhere, 8 to 12 hours, then the company provides lodging for us, and then you're called back to return home. And then you have federal rules with mandatory rest, kind of like a semi driver. Yeah. They can only perform service and they have certain hours they cannot work until they go back behind the steering wheel again, which, of course, we don't have steering wheels, back behind the throttle.
Right. But it's a couple of days on, couple of days off kind of a thing, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. And the company has done a lot of great things with the scheduling for the train crews, a little more predictability. They're working hand over fist to make the life much better for our employees.
And you said you were mostly south there in Texas and across the southern United States. Were there other parts of the country that you wanted to see? Were there? Do you have a favorite route? Would you have liked to come up like into the Rocky Mountains up here in Colorado?
Well, I was about to say, not just because you're in Denver, but the Moffett Tunnel,
sure.
Traveling through the mountains. That would just be. I'm South Texas,
right?
Mesquite, oak trees, very few hills. But then to come into territory where you're at would just be phenomenal. Operate a train in the snow and the side of mountains through the tunnels would be just an incredible opportunity. Maybe before I retire.
Yeah, you should take the train. There is an Amtrak train that goes from Denver to Glenwood Springs. And I've run that route, and it's a lot of fun. It's beautiful to go through the Moffett Tunnel. It is dark in there, and they close down all the vents so they don't get the exhaust there in the train. And it's dark, and you're in there for a lot longer than you expect. But then coming out of there, going through Granby and Kremling, and then going over to the Colorado River, it is spectacular country because you're seeing a part of the state. And you probably experienced this with your routes, that there are no roads. And so you are seeing things that the normal driver doesn't see. And it's only by train that you can see these sites.
And it's great. I mean, the wildlife you see, the beautiful ranches we go through, amazing sunsets and sunrises. It brings a tear to your eye how beautiful it can be because you have no light noise, light pollution from the cities or nothing. You're 100 miles from anybody and you're sitting there on a train and it's just like, they pay me to do this? Just stare out the window.
That's amazing. My guest is Buck Russel. He's Union Pacific Railroad's Manager of Public Safety. We're talking about railroading and talk about safety around trains here in just a second. In some urban areas, there are trains that they will stop, and sometimes they block roads for 10 or 20 or 30 minutes. Do you as a train engineer try to limit that time across a road? Do you not think about it much? Do you know that some of the folks that are trying to get through there are inconvenienced and maybe getting bugged that a train's blocking their favorite road?
We do have maps. The crews know their territory and they know how much train they can fit between crossings. If possible, we try to separate the train and allow traffic to move. Or, we're mechanical. So sometimes it's just a little bit beyond the train crew's control, but we have response teams that come out and immediately working on, kind of like NASCAR. They're there, they're ready to go, and they have all the tools and the training they need to address anything out in the field. But we do understand the disruptions it creates in the communities we operate in, and we do everything we can to stay off those crossings and park the train out of town or communicate with our dispatch teams and our operating managers about when we can go or cannot go. And it's the open lines of communication that we have with ourselves and our 7,300 communities we operate in.
Right. What kind of a career is working for the railroads? Is it rewarding? Is it worth it? If you could talk to your younger self, would you tell yourself you should get into the railroad industry earlier?
I think I've made some very good choices. Like I said, former police officer, so I've always had safety in mind, and that's why I lean towards the safety side, educating the young ones, our senior drivers, and everybody in between. But the railroad has taken very good care of me. I have a high school diploma. College was not my thing. I chose the military route. Did some time in the Gulf War and stuff like that, became a police officer, and then the railroad come a calling. But the railroad has financially taken very, very good care of me, and the retirement is amazing. So 26 years in, I got 4, maybe 8 more years, and we'll see how it goes. But no, I cannot complain about the life the railroad has provided me. I work when I'm asked to, work substance free, and work safely. Safety is always number one on the railroad.
Yeah, and is it a career that you think younger folks could get into now and serve like you have nearly 30 years on the railroad?
Absolutely. We're always hiring anything from mechanical to welders to track folks to train crews. We need managers, folks who are just getting out of college and looking for a great company. A large corporation. We were founded in 1862 by Abraham Lincoln, part of the Transcontinental Railroad, and a company that is established is not going anywhere, and get their college degree, put it to use, and benefit the railroad and the communities we work in.
Right. My guest is Buck Russel, Union Pacific Railroad Manager of Public Safety, talking about being safe around the trains and also some railroading. When I was flying around in the traffic helicopter, I would average seeing, it's sad to say this, but it was a fact of life. I would average seeing a dead person once a week. And that sticks with you. As a locomotive engineer, you were personally involved in 2 train versus pedestrian incidents. I know you had 1 highway grade crossing collision. And I'm sure as I'm just speaking about it right now, in your mind, you're probably flashing back to those, and you can probably see them in your mind right now.
I will never forget them. Every time you went over that section of track, even when I go to the towns, I'm thinking always, I remember, and mostly when they're younger. The youngest one she was 19. I understand she did survive. I did not want to know if she did or did not. I just, my own personal, if she didn't, it just kind of deal with it. Everybody handles it a little different. We do have processes that we get the crews off the train. We have peer counselors. And if somebody needs a little bit more help after that peer-to-peer talk, then we have professionals that can take over and get them back to work and get them focused on work without other things involved that they need to deal with what they witness. Because nobody goes to work wanting to see someone's loved one either fatally or life-changing injuries, on the railroad.
Right. Yeah. It's a area, the railroad tracks, that are fascinating to people. It's just fun to be around, especially as a kid. I think of the movie Stand By Me when the kids are walking down the track, right? Why are the people, you think, attracted so much to these tracks? Are they just walking? Are they just taking a shortcut? Do they live near the tracks and just try to cross over?
It appears there's numerous reasons. I think the most disturbing ones that get me are when adults put children in that situation. Schools that take pictures of volleyball teams or graduation pictures on the tracks. There's a lot of wedding pictures. It has that nostalgia. It's a different look. Your life is going down the tracks happily ever after you're married. Yeah. And then a train comes around the corner. And, unfortunate things happen, but it's just convenience. Mom and dad used to take the shortcut on the tracks. Nothing ever happened to them. I'll do it too. They don't understand it is private property. Trains are deceptively quiet. You cannot hear a train sneaking up on you. You're listening for the clickety clack. We don't have that anymore. Plumes of smoke. We are our carbon footprint is so cut in half. It's like our carbon footprint on Union Pacific is like 75% less than semi trucks. So you can't see the smoke, you can't hear the train, and then next thing you know, we're on top of you.
Yeah, I think the older trains, you would hear the whistle more often. They were louder. They shake the ground, and even the locomotives that you're talking about that you were on, I know from dining at a restaurant. One of my favorite places is right next to a Union Pacific track, and when the train comes through there, it rumbles the ground, but it's still quieter, I think, than the older trains. It maybe that's why, if you want to speculate, is that why people are caught off guard when it comes to being hit by a train? They're just not aware. They're in their own mind and not being paid. They go, it looks like an empty track, so why would there be a train here?
And then they do, or I've never seen a train. Well,
Yeah.
freight service, we do not run on a schedule. We run at our customers, and the customers, the commitments we have made to them. So the old number 5 will be here at 5 o'clock. That is not the case. We do not run on a schedule. But also the technology. I mean, the headphones we put in our ears, noise canceling headphones. Not only do they cancel out crying babies on an airplane, but they cancel out the sound of a train horn and everything else. And they think, oh, I can feel a train, but there's no rumbling, there's no clickety clack, there's no smoke, and they think they're going to hear. Or they're distracted. Personally, I carry 2 cell phones, one work, one phone, one home. And so I have 2 cameras with me, 2 devices to distract me. And if you do it around the train tracks, those are when unfortunately events happen.
Can you, as a train engineer, are you able to see down the track a long distance? Do you have any kind of, or would maybe this be a decent idea, is to have some kind of a radar? I know airplanes have that sort of technology. Now I know they have their systems in the airplane that tell you where all the other airplanes are. But do you have other cameras maybe that can see down the track, so maybe you can see these people before you have some kind of an incident?
Right now, there's no technology that I know of, radars and stuff like that. I do know the Federal Railroad Administration, our governing body, they are always looking to improve. Plus, Union Pacific internally, our engineering mechanical forces, they're always looking to improve the technology. And our people come up with a lot of creative things, and just it takes time to put it out there. But yeah, we can see down the track, and a lot of times you're kind of like, what is that? Kind of, maybe come off the throttle, start slowing down. And then if you realize it's a person, a vehicle, or some other object, then, you hit the emergency brakes. And of course, when you hit the emergency brakes, the average 12 million pound train traveling at only 55 miles an hour can take a mile or more to come to a stop. And after the crew hits the emergency brakes, there's nothing else they can do. Just lay on the horn and hopes that person or that vehicle gets out of the way as they slide down the tracks. Because we can stop, but we cannot stop quickly.
Is it as really, when you throw on those emergency brakes, is it just locking up the wheels and then it's just that friction that's trying to stop this train? Is there any way you turn the engine to go backwards to get those wheels going backwards, or is it just friction?
It is just like when you slam on the brakes in your car and you just stop. But unfortunately, it's a person or people in a vehicle, and there's an impact. Hopefully they get out of the way, but no, it's just the same as a car. You push on the brakes and it's just, the rubber to the road. Here it is, steel wheels to steel rail. And you just hope they get out of the way or you stop in time.
Yeah. And there's this program called Safe Kids that helps educate people and parents, right, about especially kids being near railroad tracks, because it's unfortunate when you're talking about one child every 5 days is either hit or killed by a train. That's astounding.
It really is a disheartening number every 5 days. But unfortunately, though, about every 3 hours, somebody in the United States is either struck the person is struck or a vehicle is struck every 3 hours in the United States, according to the Federal Railroad Administration. But our partners at like Safe Kids, they get out in the communities, they help pass that on to parents. Not only do they do the railroad safety, they can talk to them about car seat safety, watch out for snakes and everything else, the holistic thing that ensuring those children are safe in our communities. But yes, the trains are a big part of the education outreach that Safe Kids do with us. Also, our partners like at Operation Lifesaver Incorporated in the Texas A&M Transportation Institute. So it's not only Union Pacific pushing that safety message, it's all these other partners that can get into these other organizations and push that message for us.
My guest is Buck Russel, Union Pacific Railroad Manager of Public Safety. We're talking about safety around trains, especially if you're a pedestrian, and also some railroading questions as well. You were talking about pedestrians being hit by trains, but I think we see more videos of when a truck or a car is hit by a train. What are some of the popular reasons maybe you've heard of why people either stopped on the track or were eventually hit by a train?
It's distractions in the vehicles. There's some pretty darn good sound systems. The cab of vehicles are very quiet. There's a lot of distractions in the vehicles. That's one thing you see on TV commercials. It has this extra large, heads up display and everything else. And your distractions in the vehicle, your passengers distracting you, cell phones, unfortunately, also texting. Folks forget to look both ways and always expect a train from any direction on any track. They don't stop. The crossings are legal intersections, and there's a stop or yield sign, and you're required by law to abide by the signage at the crossing and yield the right-of-way by law to a train. Trains have the right-of-way over everyone, fire, police, and EMS, because like we already discussed, we can stop. We just cannot stop quickly. Unfortunately, we all seen people drive around the lowered gates. Yeah. And I don't know if you've ever noticed next to the signal mast, that's a flashing red light on the crossing arm. The one in the middle is also a flashing red light. So the one on the very end is a solid red stoplight. So if you go around the lowered gate, not only did you run a stoplight, you could be hit and injured by a train, and law enforcement may want to have a talk with you also. But stopping on the tracks, people, let me just squeeze in. Here, I see a train coming. Let me squeeze in real quick before the train comes. I don't want to be blocked. I gotta go. And then they stop on top of the tracks, and then unfortunately they get struck by a train also.
Yeah, and I've seen that where somebody might even get stuck or stall out. I don't know how it always happens with a truck or somebody who just stalls out, and then they're in their car and they don't know what to do. I would think the first thing to do is, if their car did stop and they were at fault trying to get across the tracks, just to at least get out of the car and get away from the collision.
Exactly. There's a blue and white sign, and on every single railroad crossing approach, we're required by federal standard to have a blue and white sign. It's called the Emergency Notification System, the ENS. It has the toll-free number of the dispatching railroad. It has the crossing identification number, and then the dispatching railroad number on it. In the United States, there's approximately 402,000 crossings. Wow. 402. Union Pacific, we have slightly over 30,000 crossings in the United States. So every single crossing has that blue and white sign. Look for the toll-free number, look for the crossing ID, and that is a direct line to the railroad. And this is one time that you want to call if there's an emergency at a crossing. Call the railroad first, and then your second call to be to 911. You got to talk to the railroad. We got to get the word to the trains. There's an emergency up ahead. Come to an emergency stop. Just slow down, stay out of town, whatever it might be. Because if you call 911, okay, where are you at? Main Street. Every city has a main street. Yep. Every city has a frontage road. Call the railroad. That talks railroad to us, that blue and white sign. And we're going to call 911 and the appropriate response agencies for you also. But call us, let us talk to the trains, and let's get the proper people headed that way from the railroad.
Are those 800 numbers always manned? I mean, is there somebody always there ready to answer those calls?
Oh, yes, that's part of the federal mandate. And it says the dispatching railroad. So our emergency center, we call it the Response Management Communication Center, RMCC, and it is 24 hours in Omaha, Nebraska. It is our 911 system. For any emergency questions that you have about the railroad, you can call, and those folks that get first responders headed your way, or they can get you directed to the proper agency that can get you, our internal department that can get you an answer.
But even if it was 30 seconds notice, going from dispatch to the train to start slowing down, I mean, that could be really the difference between life and death in some of those instances.
100%. Seconds matter. Seconds really matter. It's just like having a stroke. It's every second matters. You got to get that person first aid. Same thing. Every second matters. You got to call us and let's get the first aid, notified to the train crews and everybody else.
My guest is Buck Russel. He's the Union Pacific Railroad Manager of Public Safety. We're talking about safety around trains. And obviously, we're talking about safety. You guys have a safety message that you're always promoting, and you're out promoting for Rail Safety Week. Don't you think that everyone basically knows at this point in your life that trains are dangerous, and that you shouldn't be around a train if you're walking or if you're going to be trying to get across the arms? I mean, you would think that most people would know that. So does reminding them, does it seem futile that people are just not listening, or it's still happening over and over and over again?
It just, a lot of folks just don't know, or they've seen the movies, or they've seen other people do a bad behavior, and well, they got away with it, and I can too. I know personally, my spouse, my wife, she did not know about the blue and white sign. She didn't understand the dangers of railroads until we married, and I was able to educate her. And that's actually something I do with all my family members, mostly the newer drivers. You're going to listen to Uncle Buck do a railroad safety message for you. But with the crossing incidences decreasing over the last few years, I think we've been able to get that message out. And with Rail Safety Week, we're all pushing the same message down the tracks to the communities, say the 7,300 communities Union Pacific operates in. But we're not only doing it on Union Pacific, it's all the railroads, it's all of our safety partners, Safe Kids. We're all pushing the cart down the tracks to save lives.
When I was in radio forever ago, we used to do a remote broadcast from this place. It was called Newsland, and it was before the internet, when you had all these different newspapers. They would have, it was a store where you had all these different newspapers from around the country and all these different magazines, very wild magazines, and one of them was called Hobo Times, and they would have story. Maybe you remember it or heard of it. You guys,
I have.
Yeah. So in the Hobo Times, it would tell stories of people jumping on the rails and then riding on these freight trains, either in the area that's in between the two cars, or maybe in a box car. We've all seen that. Conjunction junction. What's your function? Jumping right with the hobos with the stick and the handkerchief, or riding in some of those other cars. Does that still happen? Are there people doing that? Are you catching people doing that?
Not as much. They understand that number one, it is trespassing. They are committing a crime, and we will prosecute, working through our police department. We do have a police department. We call them special agents. And they will actively, if there's enough, evidence to pursue charges, they will. And these folks could end up in jail. But I think with working to get that message out with all of our safety partners that it is just deadly, don't try it. There's other ways to do it. To travel, to see the country, just don't do it. Plus, like I said, number one, it's trespassing, and it is deadly.
I have to admit to you, Buck, I had that dream in college that I wanted to go. I actually bought a railroad at the time, a map of all the different railroads in the entire United States, and it was segmented by the southeast, the northeast, and everything. I was considering it, but I never did it.
Good.
It's maybe I can't say it's one of my regrets in life, but I'm telling you, I think it could have been fun, and then end up somewhere up in the northeast. I don't know.
But no, we actively, look for the trespassers. They're not pedestrians; they are trespassers. on our property. And then we do a lot of outreach towards the oil and gas exploration, New Mexico, West Texas, South Texas. And then we do a lot of outreach towards harvest activities, sugarcane in Louisiana, grain and cotton, to educate those folks also who drive those slow moving, low profile, heavy haul moving vehicles. Because those are the vehicles that, that can actually turn a train over. They injure our employees, and also members of the public. So those are vehicle and opportunities that we're always looking for to get an audience with.
I got two last ones for you there, Buck. Okay, first, it always made me crazy trying to figure out how, all right, I can understand you have the locomotives in the front and it's pulling the train, but then you have an engine right there in the middle and you have some in the back. So how are they pushing the train without pushing the other cars off of the track, and how do you coordinate all of it so it's all moving at the same speed so you're not pulling too much and pushing too much?
The technology we have nowadays is absolutely amazing. I never ever would have thought 26 years ago when I started that we would do what we do. Plus the skill level of our professionals running those trains, they care, they're proud of their job, and it's a feather in your hat, make it from A to B without anything happening. But what it is, they're distributed units, the distributed power units, and the engineer tells those units where they're at in the train, and then they can have the middle locomotive braking and the rear ones with power, and it helps get over undulating territories, going up and down hills. It helps with braking as you're going up and down hills, and we can move a lot more freight with the technology, so it puts less trains out on our network, I guess you could put it. So just the technology that we have and the professionals we have running those trains has really allowed us to have those distributed locomotives in the trains.
Yeah, it's just fascinating to see how all that works, but it's starting to make more sense now. So finally, is it dangerous for a train to roll over a penny on the track? And I say this because when I was a kid, I was growing up in near in the Detroit area, and we were at this place called Greenfield Village in Dearborn, Michigan, and it's an old 1700s village, and they have a little railroad that goes through there. And Ben Franklin, who's walking around, he my brothers and I were putting our pennies on the railroad track right there, waiting for the train to come by, and he goes, a penny on the railroad is a penny flat. I've never forgotten that. But I've also wondered, if you put a penny on the railroad on a real train, is it going to mess you guys up?
It won't derail a locomotive. It weighs about 500,000 pounds, but it puts the person who put the penny in danger. They're trespassing on private property, and they're engrossed in their activity, and they may not see rail equipment or a train coming. They may slip and fall, on the ballast. That it's kind of loose. It's loose rocks. But also think about the steel rails that hold all that weight, and that giant locomotive with those steel wheels, it's going to squish that penny or that nickel, and it could shoot it out like a rocket, just like a missile. And unfortunately, it could strike somebody, and it could take their life if it hits them in the proper spot. So it's just not working. Go to the Cowboy and Indian Museum and use the penny squasher out front in the lobby. That's exactly what it does, and everybody's safe.
Yeah. Would it take something? It would probably have to take something big. I've seen people put rocks on the railroad tracks and other debris. I would think it would have to be something big to really stop the train or mess you guys up, right?
Yeah, it's just like the semis, the loaded semis with sand and other agricultural products that really, myself being a public safety guy, gives me some concern.
Sure. Well, it's been a fascinating conversation, Buck. I appreciate all of your history and all of the safety messages. It really is nice to talk to you with your experience to know what it's like to be on the rails.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to chat with it, and good to meet you.
Well, that was awesome. I thought it was super cool. It's interesting to hear that he only basically went through just this part of the country. I think that's how it works for a lot of the folks. They keep them close to a home base. So if you live like Buck does in San Antonio, that you're going to be running rails somewhere there in South Texas, maybe into New Mexico. If you live in I don't know. If you live in Missouri, you're going to be probably doing the Missouri run and through St. Louis and maybe to Kansas City. And if you live out here in the Rocky Mountains, you'll probably be doing that run. But it's interesting to see how those folks do what they do and around tracks. And yeah, I used to read that Hobo Times. And yeah, I still have that feeling that I would want to ride on the rails. And I know it would make Buck crazy, but trespassing really isn't that big of a crime anymore, is it? Maybe it is, and maybe they do put people in jail for it. But anyway, I think it would be so much fun. And there's YouTube videos I know, and I don't know if they've taken them off, but I know years ago I've seen YouTube videos of people documenting their adventures with riding on trains and going from place to place to place. And yeah, it is dangerous, obviously. But there's always an inherent risk about anything you do, and sometimes can it be done safely? I think if we're all being honest, yeah, there are times when the train is running either at 1 mile an hour or stopped that you could jump on and off and situate yourself, and then the train's going again. Is it probably the safest thing to be out in the open air while the train is going at 50 or 60 miles an hour down the tracks somewhere in the middle of a country where you don't have any emergency services within miles and miles and miles because the trains go sometimes where the people aren't? Yeah, it's probably not the safest thing to do, but again, there's the adventure part of it, right? That's part of being on the adventure of riding the rails and being like the hobos in Conjunction Junction. What's your function? It's just, isn't that what it is? Anyway, I don't think at my ripe old age, in my 50s now, that I'm going to be hitting the rails, and I think my wife would kill me before I even tried to jump on a train. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. And until next time, I'm Jason Luber, the traffic guy. Be safe, and as always, happy motoring.